This is apropos. Donald Trump says Israel and Hezbollah have agreed to dial back the fighting after the US president held talks with Benjamin Netanyahu and communicated with the Iran-backed militant group through mediators. The comments came hours after residents began streaming out of the southern suburbs of Beirut after the Israeli government ordered fresh airstrikes there and as Tehran threatened to pull out of indirect negotiations. Netanyahu later said the IDF would continue to operate as planned in southern Lebanon, warning that Israel would strike terror targets in Beirut if Hezbollah failed to cease its attacks. With more, here's France 24's Noga Tanopolsky reporting from Jerusalem.
The Israeli defense minister simply said that Trump had accepted the Israeli parameters, which appears to be incorrect. We now see that the Prime Minister Netanyahu, he has released a statement somewhat defiant. He acknowledges that he spoke with President Trump tonight and says that he told him that if Hezbollah keeps shooting Israel, then Israel will respond. So unclear again, but Israel did stop its planned airstrikes in Beirut today. So we have that as a fact to follow. Let me add one more thing. The leader of the opposition, who's a former prime minister, Yair Lapid, immediately with this news did respond, and he said that Israel has been turned into, I'm quoting now, a total vassal state by Netanyahu, in which orders are given by the United States. And another former prime minister, Naftali Bennett, accused Netanyahu of giving up on Israeli sovereignty. So the reactions are quite harsh. And I am seeing, as I said to you, just one line from this defiant Netanyahu statement in which he claims that he told President Trump that Israel would stop firing only if Hezbollah does, and didn't really go much further than that.
Noga Tanopolsky in Jerusalem. Well, meanwhile, in New York, the UN Security Council is set to hold an emergency meeting to discuss the fighting in Lebanon at the request of France after the Israeli military seized a medieval castle in Lebanese territory over the weekend. Well, to discuss, we're joined now by Bilal Y. Saab, Senior Fellow and Director of the Defence and Security Programme at the Middle East Institute. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme this evening, Bilal. As our correspondent Noga Tanopolsky suggested there is some uncertainty tonight about what exactly the situation is when it comes to these various peace talks and initiatives to end the war in the Middle East. Meanwhile, as we say, the UN Security Council is going to be talking about the situation in Lebanon in a short time. What difference do you think these discussions, this emergency session in New York, is going to have when it comes to the situation on the ground in Lebanon?
I really don't have any high hopes for what's going to transpire in New York City, to be honest with you. But just to clarify, my position with the Middle East Institute ended 2 years ago. I'm currently with Trends Research and Advisory, heading their Washington, D.C. office. I put in a lot more weight in the conversations that are taking place between the United States and Israel, to be honest with you, and how they might impact the situation in Lebanon more than any other multilateral diplomacy taking place in New York with the UN. It's nice to raise the urgency, politically speaking, but I just have my doubts about the efficacy of those talks and stopping the killing and the military campaign in southern Lebanon.
And in terms of the efficacy, what do you make of the timing? Like, why has France decided to do this now, do you think?
Are the French deciding to do it now?
France is the one who's called the Security Council meeting for this evening following the various developments over the weekend. But why has it taken so long, do you think, for Paris to actually act here?
I don't think they really have many good options, frankly, in Lebanon. They understand very well that those who hold the cards are the Americans and certainly the Israelis. But I don't need to tell you this, there's a certain French legacy, obviously, in Lebanon, a certain care, cultural, and a certain long experience of the French in Lebanon. So they have to show some kind of diplomatic activity. And the only way for them to do that is to go through the United Nations Security Council.
And what do you make of the comments that we've heard from Donald Trump this evening? Also, Benjamin Netanyahu. How much pressure is Donald Trump applying on the Israeli Prime Minister? The two had a talk earlier on this evening, after which Benjamin Netanyahu said that, that he will be pulling back somewhat, but the threat remains. If Hezbollah continues to strike Israeli targets, Israel will do so also, and it will attack Beirut again, the southern suburbs.
Yeah, quite an interesting exchange of words there. And I listened to the report of your colleague and the defiance shown by the Israeli Prime Minister. I hate to say, absolutely hate to say, that the words of this particular president don't carry as much weight as any other American president, as any other commander in chief. And the proof of that is that he's been all over the place, making all sorts of statements, some of which have panned out, many of which have been quite contradictory, frankly. So this baffling conduct in U.S. foreign policy, the pursuit of foreign policy over true social, it just leaves you with the impression that there's a lot of ad hocery, there's a lot of lack of cohesion in what the president is trying to communicate and what he's trying to achieve. That said, I think the Israeli Prime Minister is going to be quite careful not to alienate his only external ally, but certainly not at the expense of alienating his own cabinet, which is the most important source of political pressure for the Israeli Prime Minister. He alienates them, then his political survival is at risk.
Yeah, because is this mostly aimed, do you think, at shoring up his position with his coalition partners, also bearing in mind that we have elections coming up in the not too distant future?
Yes, couldn't agree more. You can see that the opposition is sort of breathing down his neck, right? You would think that the opposition is in a position to think outside the box, think a little bit more rationally about this campaign, which obviously is bringing, memories of what happened in the past, failed military intervention in Lebanon. But no, I mean, there's a healthy political consensus, frankly, in Israel about the merits and about the desirability of such a campaign. So they've taken this opportunity to attack the prime minister precisely for the reason that you mentioned, and I agree with you. It's because of the upcoming elections.
And in terms of what's happening with Iran, we're also getting a bit of mixed messaging, not surprising perhaps, coming from Donald Trump, coming from the Iranians. They're threatening to suspend peace talks a little earlier on if Lebanon is not included in any future deal between Washington and Tehran. What do you think is actually going to happen there? Is Benjamin Netanyahu going to have to accept whatever is essentially imposed upon him by the Americans?
No, I don't think so. I think he's going to have sufficient margin of maneuvering in Lebanon. I mean, he may not completely defy the wishes of the president urgently, but once an MOU is signed between Iran and the United States, whenever that happens, by the way, because we don't know, I think he'll just go back to military action and pursuing what seems to be an exclusively, military campaign in Lebanon with very little reliance on any kind of diplomacy. They're not leveraging the talks, frankly. They're just using the talks more as a tool to, punish, if not pressure, the Lebanese government to move more decisively against Hezbollah, except that the Lebanese government is in no position to do that, for all sorts of other political considerations, including, of course, the risk of some kind of a, civil sectarian conflict between the Shia community and the Lebanese army.
And what are you expecting, if anything, from separate talks that have been ongoing between Israeli and Lebanese representatives in the US? Is Washington placing any pressure at all on the Israeli representatives there, do you think? What kind of outcome are we going to see achieved during or after those talks?
I'd like to be quite optimistic about those, but I cannot maintain, objectivity, frankly, if I were to be optimistic. I'm quite cautiously sort of neutral. Okay, let's just say neutral. There's not a ton of progress that's been made now. It's now 4 rounds. They're going to meet up again this week. The diplomats themselves, just the latest one was between the military representatives from both sides. It's like they're speaking different languages. Let's be candid about that. Different priorities. The Lebanese are insisting, rightly or wrongly, on an immediate ceasefire. The Israelis want further action on the part of the Lebanese government to move forward on the issue of Hezbollah's disarmament. So it's like two deaf people trying to talk to each other. Does that mean that the talks are completely irrelevant? No. From a Lebanese political point of view, it does give the optics, the semblance of a Lebanese government trying to assert itself and in foreign policy and especially its control over very important decisions like war and peace. But practically speaking, there's just very little that the Lebanese government is able to do without the support of the Americans, who seem to be sort of wishy-washy, frankly, on this whole process. I don't think they're viewing it really as a major priority. There are far more important priorities right now, but with the Iranians, including the Strait of Hormuz, including the fate of the nuclear program.
And also when Hezbollah is, very opposed to the talks that are happening as well in the US, what can really be achieved without the militant group being on board?
Well, they're sort of trying to include the group indirectly, obviously, because nobody wants them in the room. I don't want them in the room, and the Lebanese government certainly doesn't want them in the room, because that would obviously challenge this whole notion of the Lebanese government being sovereign and making decisions on its own. But they're trying to sort of include them in the negotiations indirectly by getting a commitment from them to stop firing in Israel. And that's precisely the last true social post by the president, right? So the Hezbollah would stop firing and then the Israelis would reciprocate. But they go through this through intermediators, like interlocutors, through the parliament speaker, who obviously is a strong ally of Hezbollah. There's no question that there is, no matter how much we deny it or wish it away, there's linkage. There's clear linkage between the U.S.-Iran negotiations and what happens in the talks between the Israelis and the Lebanese. If one thing falls apart, it's going to have adverse effects on the other. But the Lebanon-Israel file also has sort of a life of its own. Like it is complex on its own, in its own right, frankly, to merit a track of its own. And I just have my doubts of how far we're going to go before we get any kind of clarity between the United States and Iran in their talks, which have yet to be confirmed. I mean, they haven't even signed the MOU yet to start talking.
Lots more questions remain unanswered. Thank you so much, Bilal. We'll have to leave it there for now. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. That's Bilal Y. Saab, Senior Managing Director of Trends Research. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme.